Apocalypse Gaming.
Hey folks, welcome back to part 3 of my Eldar Defence Lines. If you're still hanging around and watching this, thanks. And what I'm doing now is, I considered it, but thanks to comments on the first video, it certainly pushed me towards doing it, is making my force fields. And what I've done is I've taken my original template and used that to create a negative design which will fit into the sweeping curve, and drawn it on acetate. Just to make sure the ink mark stayed on the acetate, I used a CD pen, the sort of ones you use for writing on your CDs, DVDs, and I'll just go ahead and cut these out. Back now. So the next stage in the process was cleaning these little bits of acetate up. What I did is I used Windoline. It used to be for the airbrush, I don't use it anymore, but I've got it dispensed in this. But what it's very good for is removing pen marks. So, as I say, it was one of those CD pens, and it cleans straight off with the Windoline. But I also want this nice and clean to accept some paint, because that's the next thing I'm going to do. So, back in a second. What I've done now, guys, is I've mounted my acetate just on my little spray tubs the way I'd normally mount my figures, just so that I don't go touching the paint. I'm going to be using Tamiya Clear Blue X23. Always thin your Tamiya paints with a Tamiya thinner. It's made up slightly differently from your normally acrylic paints. Unless anybody can tell me any different with another thinner, then this is by far the best option to go with, just because it's made up slightly differently. So I've thinned it already, and I'm going to go in with the airbrush. I'm using the Iwata again, and just give this a nice coating. Oops, didn't mount that one, huh? Firm enough. It's not sticking at all in my blue tack, possibly too much paint on there. Giving this a nice coating of the clear, and that will represent the force fields. So thanks again for the prompting, and whoever says I should do this. I had thought about doing it. Now in retrospect it sounds like I could be a liar, but I had thought about it, but I hadn't decided. But with the prompting I thought, you know what, it is a good idea, let's go ahead and get this done. It'll just help finish the piece, make it look more believable for the fluff that I had in my mind, representing what they were supposed to look like. And besides, it gives me a chance to use the Tamiya paints, because the clears that they do, if you haven't used them, again, it's another great set of paints to have in your armoury. I like using them for canopies. They just give a nice effect in the Falcon's grav tanks. So you can see them just sitting there. That one didn't get enough. Let's just give that a bit more. So you can see how it looks, and that, I think, when it sets up and dries, could look an absolutely stunning force field. So I'll just do a double check on these, but I'll turn the camera off, make sure there's any bits that might need a second coat, and then I'll let these dry, and we'll come back with attaching them to the actual defence lines. Back in a minute. So my friends, when you are painting these bits of acetate up, show some more patience than I have, because I've created quite a few bits of mess during this bit of process. Make sure you let the Tamiya dry. Make sure, if you're letting the Tamiya dry, that the varnish, if you're going to put some on top, you also let that dry. Certainly don't let both mixes still be wet and then pick them up with your fingers and smudge and ruin it. So you have to start the process again. Then don't knock your Tamiya paint all over your table. That's not a clever thing to do. Not that I would do that. Not pointing any fingers at anyone that done that. Then don't think, stuff it, I've had enough, I'm going to rush the process now, and stick this on with your blue tack and try and paint it with a brush, because you end up with clear splodges, and it's far better airbrushing it than going in and trying to do it with your bristle brush, because you also end up with the streak marks of the brush running on it. So show some patience. So whilst I have another set of these drying, I went on to the next part of the process, which was breaking out my gem drawers. Now these are just sticky gems that I picked up from the pound shop a few years ago, and we thought these will come in useful at some point. I've got various different sizes. This is my small and medium drawer, and I've also got a large drawer. And I took out the gems this size, and I can't see. Where have I sat it? Oh, I put it in the wrong one. I put it here. This size and this size from the small and medium. And I have attached them here. So they're like wraith stones. I know some people will absolutely hate the fact that these are unpainted crystals, but I like it. You don't need to paint everything you put on a model, and I like the fact that these just add an extra dimension and make it look just that little bit more Eldar-y, in my humble opinion. So what I need to do now is take my knife, and what I'm going to do is just cut along here very slightly, a mil and a half, maybe 2 mils deep into the foam. I'm not going to do it on camera because it's quite difficult to get in and see it, but a mil, 2 mils maximum along here to accept my acetate when it dries. And this time I'm going to give it 24 hours to dry, seeing as I have made a mess of it several times. So I'll be back once that's dry. So to attach my acetate, I'm going to use from Microscale Industries my Crystal Clear, which is pretty much a PVA glue, and it will dry in such a manner as the name suggests, crystal clear, so you won't see any white glue marks or anything like that where the acetate is glued to the foam. So I'll just crack this open and we'll be back in a second. So as we can see here, the Crystal Clear is a very thick solution. Really thick. You do get much runnier sort of PVA solutions. It's reasonably expensive for the quantity you get, but it does a good job. It's a good high tack, strong bond. So for the little quantities that you actually do use, because you can see how little that's getting applied to the edge here, it's up to you, but I think it's a worthwhile investment rather than just relying on PVA to do the same job, because of the benefits of the high tack and the fact that you know it's definitely going to dry clear. So just set that aside, drop the lid onto it, I'll screw it back on shortly, and all we're doing is adjusting and wiggling and putting this into here. Now with these, it's better to try and start in one corner and then wiggle it all in. If you try and start in the middle, you might find yourself getting issues. And what you'll want to do is work reasonably quickly, just in case your two bits of acetate are slightly different in size, because that way you're going to guarantee getting them both to dry at the same height. If you let that one set up and then go in with the other, you're going to have issues possibly of one being slightly higher than to other. So as you can see, it doesn't take an awful lot of this stuff. It really is minute quantities just to get that edge covered. And then in with the next one. So in at the corner, and then feed the entire piece round and into the slice. And that's what I was talking about, see the difference in height. So it's just a case of back and forward with each one to get them aligned up so that it looks like the force fields are running about the same height, doesn't need to be bang on. So you can see where some of the white glue is, but that, as the name suggests, will dry clear. I could go back in with a damp brush on that and possibly just try and get it out of the way, but it's not a major requirement, I don't think, for the piece. So I'll come back and show you what it's like when it's dry. So that's the pieces dry. I'll stick it on the turntable now and light it properly and let you see it. But they've had their jewels, they've had their force fields. Thanks for all the input. I'll be making more stuff along this sort of Eldar shaped design in the coming weeks and months. But that's the first set of the project done. So as I say, I'll stick them on the turntable now and shut up and let you see them. So thanks for all your feedback.
Apocalypse Gaming.